Thank you so much. It's quite a big crowd that I'm having here. But today I want to make it as interactive as possible, but also first of all giving you a bit of a background. So the goal of this session that you should keep in mind is, what does peace mean to you? Through the last 2 days you have learned and saw and heard a lot of different stories, but I'm also interested that this session is really about you, your commitment, your local engagement, and I hope that you can share some stories how you are engaged in your community at the end of the presentation. So first of all, we dig a bit deeper in understanding what is the power of youth and your role as an agent of change in society. And then we also go into understanding the youth peace and security agenda more closely. What has happened in the last 5 years? How can you be part of it? How can you be the young peace builder, the peace educator that is really out there trying to disseminate your experience, your information from your different contexts that you all come from? Because this is such a diverse crowd that we're having here, and learning from each other is the most important. So, looking a bit broad at the broader pictures, here we have a small cohort, but understanding that young people actually make out 1.8 billion people around the world. In the last 10 years, this number has actually increased. Age 10 to 24 is what we're talking about. And if you look back, for example, in 1950, so just a couple of centuries ago, it was only 721 million young people. So you saw a huge increase in that. And we expect that this number is rising. 2050, we already have 2 billion young people. So there is a lot of power and ideas behind it. And young people's choices, ideas, creativity, and really innovation can transform the world, but that also requires a lot of investment that young people are equipped with the right skills and opportunities to do so. And if you look around, being here, being in Bangkok, at this great summit where you can meet so many people from around the world, but if you count, every fourth young person in the world is actually affected by violent conflicts. And this is a lot of people. And so if you count and you see, well, here, it's actually quite a big proportion if we would look at it. So I want to start with a bit of reflection from you with the Mentimeter. You have heard about this tool before, but it's not about collecting questions. This time I want to collect some ideas from you. And the Mentimeter that I want to look at, here you got the instructions, so please take out your phones, is, what does peace mean to you? Just a word, an idea, something that came up in your mind, the first reaction that you have. A place that is mainly, where you mainly see old white men. But in 2015, in December, it was actually a bit different. All of a sudden there you saw a lot of young people, and you also see in the picture over there the youth envoy back then, Ahmed Al-Randawi. So the Security Council in December 2015 adopted the resolution 2250 on youth, peace and security. It's the first resolution that deals especially with the role of young people in peace and security. It's a landmark resolution for the recognition of the positive role that young people play. But this just didn't happen out of nowhere. It happened because there were a lot of civil society organizations, UN organizations, youth-led coalitions pushing for this recognition. So it doesn't come without nothing. It really takes a lot of lobbying effort. But it is so important in such a landmark because it's recognizing that long-lasting peace cannot be done without engaging young people. And since 2015, a lot of things have happened. So the Security Council even revisited the matter in 2018 in June and adopted the resolution 2419 because they said, well, this is not enough. We also have to have the recognition that there is a link between the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development and youth, peace and security. And this is an advance on the collective determination that the Security Council, a place that's very conservative, but it really is about international law, recognizes and listens to the voices of young people. So what exactly does 2250 say? It has 5 pillars. You see it there. It's about participation, protection, prevention, partnership, disengagement, and reintegration. So it really tackles some of the hardcore security issues, but it also has a lighter touch of participating, really engaging young people in what matters. The resolution defines youth as 18 to 29, because before 18, children are actually covered by youth in armed conflicts, so that's why it's only starting at the age of 18. It is actually expanding longer. 29, you might think, am I still youth or not? But there are different variations, different definitions, so it really is all-encompassing. And it gives also a tool for policy and programming. This global policy framework explores how conflicts impact young people's life, what can be done to mitigate their effects, and how youth can be meaningfully included. So then you think, yeah, but a resolution is just a piece of paper. It doesn't necessarily mean anything as long as it's not implemented. But as you might have noticed during the last 2 days, UN processes are also quite long. It takes a while until new language is established. And first of all, you need evidence, because we don't really know a lot of facts, data, evidence of young people in humanitarian situations, in peace and conflict. So the Security Council resolution mandated a progress study. You would say a progress study, well, it's just another 100 pages to read, but no, that's actually what it's not supposed to be. This progress study was a once in a century process because it actually included very meaningful youth consultations at the regions, at the level of countries, in conflicted areas, and really talking to marginalized groups. It also created a coalition of youth groups, of the UN, of civil society to come together, and it brought, very importantly, a lot of advocacy tools. So let's dig deeper into the aspects of this process. So 2250 mandated the progress study and then looked into youth consultations. Youth consultations, you can just tick the box, but you can also really, really engage young people in the process. So what has happened during, that was 2017 mainly, 4,230 people were consulted in over 153 countries. If you think about the membership of the UN, 193 countries, that's a pretty impressive number. 2,070 women, 2,159 young men. There were 7 regional consultations also happening here in Bangkok, but also 5 national consultations, over 281 focus group discussions in 44 countries. So that's a pretty impressive number. The lead author was Graham Simpson, and he was advised by 21 experts from 20 countries. The preparation really involved consultations, but there were also a lot of research done. 19 papers were conducted, and it was really the focus on hard-to-reach locations around the process. So what came out of this, the missing piece? The name already says, if you think about the missing piece, it's also, if you look at this missing piece to peace and security is our young people. That's a different spelling, but it's a trick in your mind that you should also think about. It really said we need to invest, include, and partner. Invest, include, and partner. Invest in young people's capacity, agency, and leadership, that there is greater flexible funding for young people's organization, for their initiatives, for their ideas. But we also look into the capacity of youth-led organization, that it's really reflecting the diversity and the creative approaches young people bring to sustaining peace. And it's about not just doing programming and project for young people, but with young people. So including them in design, implementation, evaluation of programs. Including is also a bigger aspect. So including them to transform the systems that reinforce exclusion to address structural barriers. Those structural barriers can mean young people's political participation. If you think about voting is for mostly at the age of 18, but people below the age of 18, they have political opinions as well. It's about quotas to really make sure that young people's opinions are addressed. It's involving young people in security sector reforms and human rights mechanisms, because they also have a say in that, because it's also their security and they should be asked. Prioritizing young people in meaningful and broader economic inclusion, that doesn't just mean creating jobs for young people, but really giving them the skills for employment, for lasting employment, for rewarding employment that also reaches the most marginalized, and really investing in youth education as a tool for peace. Because that's really also a factor where you can influence, manipulate young people in the wrong direction. And the last recommendation that is really big, coming big out of this missing peace progress study, is establish a partnership. That means on local, that means on community level, that means on national, regional, and global level. And having actually data, qualitative, quantitative studies that really bring evidence to the contribution of young people in processes like this. But also it looked at us, the UN, of, well, you shouldn't just tick the box of including young people. You should really learn from them, youth participation, including them in youth advisory boards to country teams at the level, in regional headquarters. The ECOSOC Youth Forum that happens every year in New York is really important to bring that back. Young people are associated with violence, that especially young men are threatening the link, the patch of the communities. Bulging young population present a really big risk to society, especially young migrants, refugees, forcibly displaced people are a potential threat to society, really draining social services. And then that just generally young men and women are tempted to join extreme violent groups. And then you think, well, I don't really see myself in this. Because what's really important is that the vast majority of young people is not involved in those things. And those myths, unfortunately, trigger a policy panic, that states reacting through enforcing their law and security system, but those processes are actually counterproductive and should be really stopped, because they actually lead to alienating young people even more. So this is one of the biggest advocacy tools that we have, is really tackling those stereotypes. Young people can also engage in different types of violence. What does peace and security mean, actually? Or violence, violent extremism, can be political conflict, it can be organized crime, sexual and gender-based violence, etc. So it really affects, there's a diversity of avenues of engagement. And not only young people, but you also find allies in the parliament, young parliamentarians. It comes in all different shades and forms. The youth strategy, the Youth 2030, if you see the link to the 2030 agenda there, is to accelerate the work with young people across 5 priority areas, and it's really committed to listen to the voices of young people in peace, resilience building, humanitarian action. You see there the priority areas, and this is a tool where, you know, we are held accountable to on really looking into what are the existing and what are the forthcoming system-wide initiatives that set up efforts to interconnect it and to also address, to build agency of young people to do so. So, and that can give you one of the avenues that really existing. But it's also, as I know, the socially connected world. Mobilization, partnerships, and speaking up. Because if you have an unfair treatment, that when you see a policy in your country that you do not agree with, look if there's someone out there who's also not in favor for it, and mobilize, come together, look into social media campaigns, mobilize at the partner level, and look for allies that you can find. I have some resources there. You can also come later on to talk to me. I can link you up with some of the resources that are available. And also here, more information. There's a QR code, but I also looked into the organization that really, really mean what they say when they talk about youth, peace and security. That's the UN Secretariat's Peacebuilding Office. And they are working together with my organization, the Youth United Nations Population Fund, as the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security. They have monthly phone calls, join a group, join those calls, that's possible. The Envoy's office, who is the custodian of the youth strategy, so there is a political leader just for young people because they really recognize that we need to do something. UNDP is investing a lot, the development program is investing a lot in youth and peace building and preventing violent extremism. But on the other side, you also see civil society organizations, the Commonwealth, UNOI, and Search for Common Ground, and they're really, really strong to connect young people at the local and national level to initiatives that happen. And while this is running over there, if I want to open up the audience, if you have a story to share.
So 2 parts to answer this question, addressing a little bit about what I do. So I work part-time on the college campus while attending school. So my work is focused on the students that are mostly in this room. So working with college students to make sure they have access to, first off, their basic needs, that you do have that food, clothing, shelter, but also to make sure that they can succeed at our school, and if they can't succeed at our school, that I can make sure that they are at an institution where they will be successful in whatever their needs are. So getting involved with that and on the local level, getting involved outside of campus, which can sound weird, but oftentimes I've found students will try and get involved on campus, but then not reach outside of campus to the community around them. So I live and work in an area that is considered Appalachia. It's a very poor community in the United States, and we have a lot of people without access to basic needs. So making sure I'm always in tune with that and reaching out to them as well. So that's how I'm addressing this, but I also do have a question for you. So related to the study that you mentioned earlier, I noticed that there was one person for a non-identified by way of gender. And as a person who is in the LGBTQ plus community and who does identify as a trans individual, what do you think with the rise of openly non-binary people who are willing to admit what their identity is and share that, how that will affect moving forward what we do to help youths?
Thanks for your question. Nothing. Well, that shouldn't stay in the middle, but we can talk about that. Thanks for your question on LGBTQI, non-identified persons. I think we really need to open up, but first of all, we need to secure safe spaces, because oftentimes people do not dare to speak up, because the world is really divided in gender norms, and tackling those norms is the most difficult. That's why it was important. The study didn't necessarily look into that question, but of course it comes because if you look at the most marginalized LGBTQI community is often tackled by violence, especially community violence, gender-based violence in all its forms. So opening up to that safe space, listening to the stories is most important. But there also needs to be a policy change in recognizing that our world is not just black and white, but there are different shades in between. And we're in there for the long run, unfortunately, but every step and every time people speak up, there might, even here in the audience, your mind's like, yeah, but I actually haven't really engaged with someone and I'm curious, and asking those questions is important. So unfortunately, the UN is only really addressing this recently, but there are, especially UNFPA, UN Women, the Development Fund, they're really looking into the issue, working with national legislator, working on policy change, working on normative change to raise that question. I see a question over there.
Hi, I'm Navi from the University of Sydney. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I know we look at individual and local action, but I have a question for you about international and national policymaking, if that's okay, because it affects norms and it's such an important tool. So my research is on the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, which is UNSCR 1325 and so on and so forth. But I can see how there's some intersection in terms of getting different groups and not just all white men in the Security Council. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to setting national policy or international policy or resolutions, how much do these agendas collaborate when going into the room and fighting, if I can say that, the status quo? Mm-hmm. And to what extent do you kind of fight for policy room and have to compromise? Mm-hmm. And the second question is, if you identify flaws, what way do you see ahead? So do you think WPS, youth, sexuality, so they should all stay separate or kind of find a way to compromise, but find a way to fight the status quo together? Mm-hmm. That's it.
I read a quote yesterday, toxic masculinity is not about men, it's about engaging men in gender equality as well. And that's really, there is a huge overlap with women, peace and security and youth peace and security. But you also have to acknowledge that women, peace and security, the agenda is around for over 25 years now. Whereas youth peace and security is really in its infancy. It celebrated the 4th anniversary in December. So we can learn from women, peace and security a lot on how policy processes have happened. This year is the conference Beijing Plus 25. Big conference will take place in Paris and in Mexico. And there was actually recognition that the women, peace and security and youth peace and security angle is not enough reflected. So there is now a global coalition, civil society mainly, that comes together and really wants to press for those issues. Because women, peace and security it's also engaging men. It's recognizing what men can do to elevate women. And it's not even, as I said before, not black and white, you know. Everyone can be engaged. And that's the same for youth, peace and security, because what you really need is an engagement, a grassroots engagement that can bring policy change. So national level legislation can happen when there is a global process that pressuring the government to implement, but also when there is a community level engagement and the pressure from society is raising up. So it has to be it has to be approached from both sides. And also what is important, it's not only intervention in itself, so you cannot do just a one-off intervention. It's about mainstreaming, but you also need the targeted intervention of quotas, of really looking into the systems that you want to change. So yeah, stay tuned for this exciting 25 years Beijing. And what will happen, there will be a lot of advocacy happening this year. But I don't think youth peace and security, women peace and security, women's political engagement, youth political engagement should be separated. It's really should be aligned. It's not just because you're advocating for one, but you also have a spillover effect to other domains of political, of economic participation. So it's really overlapping and it shouldn't be seen separate.
Thank you.
I see one person there.
Thank you for providing me this opportunity. Actually, my name is Dong-Hyun Kim, and I'm from South Korea. And actually, I'm a high school student. So actually, I came to speak about my long-lasting struggles that I have experienced in my country while participating in this kind of conversation as a youth in my society. I have actually three struggles. The first one is the adult attitudes. As a high school student, I'm really trying to participate in this kind of discourse really actively. But what I have felt was kind of like adults say that we are just young people, we are just like children, and you're in the age of studying, and you have to study while rather than like participating in this kind of discourse. So I was like kind of felt some obstacles about facing this kind of like recognition and attitudes of adults. Yeah, I want to ask you a question about this. And my second question is that I'm actually working at a civil organization that I founded, which is educate young people, mainly middle school students. And what I also felt was like, although like many youth in South Korea try to really genuinely participate in this course and really feel the emergency of these issues, but most people and many students in South Korea just utilize this kind of opportunities, and like I just thought that they are consuming this kind of topics for their kind of college admissions. Yeah, this is kind of sarcastic, but I wanted to really mention that. So my second question is that how can we like make them to really genuinely feel the emergency of this kind of issues and participate thoroughly about in this kind of discourse. And my third question is that what I also felt was like adults are utilizing youth for their accomplishments. To be specific, what I felt was like they're trying to superficially engage youth in this kind of discourse, like, and actually after having meetings with government officials and kind of adults, they actually make some announcements that we actually engaged youth. So what? We actually did. But actually, I don't think that that's kind of real engagement of youth. So my third question is that how should we tackle these issues? Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your stories and your struggles, because I think I saw a lot of nodding heads around the audience. So yeah, I recognize that. So first of all, it's to be taken seriously by policymakers, by the community, by leaders, is first of all prepare, really show them that you know what you're talking about, and as more you can actually give them, giving evidence, having a strong community behind you, engaging in youth structures, that gives you the power to be taken seriously. The second struggle you raised is, well, young people, they might engage, but it doesn't really mean anything. They consume those processes, they go to conferences, but then they do not follow up. Well, I mean, it's everyone's responsibility to learn. And it's fine if people are only dedicating a short amount of time, or if there is really an engagement. But what is most helpful to do that, and also to stay on board, is to engage in youth organizations, youth-led organizations, first and foremost, because they bring you the structures to keep engaged and to continue that engagement, because there's also this nice peer pressure of like, have you done this? You still owe me an email, and so on and so forth. So to really recognize that you stay on board and to support each other, because it's about learning together. And thirdly, you mentioned, well, you know, it's oftentimes just ticking the box, and that's really true, unfortunately. We just asked a couple of people randomly, but that doesn't mean it's meaningful. So this process, Youth, Peace and Security, also really looks at meaningful youth engagement. It's about accountability. It's about following up. And that's also your responsibility, to follow up with policymakers and said, well, nothing has happened here, but we discussed the issue 6 months ago, so can we see the results? And going through different angles, going through different avenues, asking from one side or the other, that can help you on that struggle. But there is no one-fits-all solution. It's every time it's different to the context, but you also have to understand you're not in there alone. So find your peers, find your friends that you want to work with, and then encourage each other. That's the most important.
Thank you.
Let me take, first of all, there. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mina, and I come from Taiwan. And like in South Korea or in Japan, they really respect the ones that are elder. And if you're having your opinion, they might see you as disrespectful. And it's really hard to engage in a conversation. Also, when we have like different political views, or when we want to try to have like try to convey something, some ideas, it's really a big gap between two different generations, because in our generation, the tool we know how to use, like technology and so on, we're always communicating with the same group of people. It's still our generation. And it's really hard. Every time there is a public voting, it's always like, the percentage is basically like how the population is formed. Like the youth still talk to their own people, and the elderly still talk to their own people. And we have been talking a lot about how strong youth could be, how many advantages we have. We have ideas, we are strong, we are flexible, but maybe these qualities aren't regarded as good qualities from those perspectives. And the reality is they're still the ones that have the power to change. So I want to ask is, what do you think that are the things that they don't see in youth, or why do they not use youth in the first place? And because I think this is important to know. We all know that we are powerful and we can make a change, but it's also important to know why they don't think we can, or why they don't want to listen, so we can prove the points. For example, they think we don't have experience. Maybe we could use data. We're good at collecting data. We know how to use technology. Use these things to prove like, oh, yes, you have your experience, but this is like the general thing. This is what we're working on. We can also get experience from other ways, for example. So I wanted to see, like, are there more aspects like this that we could understand and make a prove and actually like work together? Otherwise, the gap between generations would just be bigger and bigger. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that super important intervention. you raised a point that I wasn't able to address in my presentation in this cultural contexts. That it might be very, very different. The struggle is different from even one community to another in the same country, but it also is very country and context specific. And those solutions are difficult for me to just generalize. But I want to ask you then, you're telling us the struggle, but have you also found avenues to overcome that? Has it maybe worked in 1 or 2 times that you were addressing a problem and you were heard? And what was different?
We were just asking a question. The first one is, you can ask them the question, so if we are not that important, then in the first place, why do you put me in school? If you want me to gain more education, then why you don't want to listen to me? The first thing is, we educate them to know the importance of us being in the society, being part of that society. If you look at all the countries, I don't know about any other countries, but I think in the United States, those from the United States can say that during a presidential election, the majority of population that voted for the presidents are only old people, no young people. A few maybe because they come from a political environment in the home of people who were involved in politics. But for others, they don't care. So that's one thing. We need to educate. We need to be that advocate in helping people understand that simple thing, that we are part of that change. I like to share an experience. I come from Brigham Young University in Hawaii, and it's a diverse culture also in that school. And coming up from a background where it's a male-dominated society, and coming to another society where it allows everyone to speak up, it's kind of difficult, but it opens my eyes to see the importance of others' perspective also that can help me, in progressing towards whatever I'm working on. So we come up with a club that's called Women Empowerment. Hawaii is one of the 50 states in America, and it has the highest rate of sex trafficking of young girls. So we created a club in empowering young women by teaching them martial arts. If they walk around during dark or anything and someone grab them, they can defend themselves, or they can say no. Because most girls, they can't say no. When someone who is older than them force them to do something, they can't say no because they're scared. So we are here for peace, security, and for all youth. This is what we all should put in our goals, to help others also. Empower them to know that we can do a big change in people's lives. And to tell you, the maturity of girls in Brigham Young University, they attended that course for 5 weeks. And most of them, when we do a survey on that, they said they love it. It helped them.
Thank you for sharing that, because it also says that, youth, peace and security doesn't, you don't have to tackle the policy and reform the security sector. No, it's sports. It's really giving other opportunities, other avenue, learning to speak up. And also to come to your questions, what you've raised, the Youth Envoy, the United Nations Youth Envoy, has started a campaign, Not Too Young to Run, running for official offices, that really looking into, I might not have the same experience as people age 50 plus, but I can bring other perspectives to the table. My diversity, my background also counts. I count as a person, and I have the ambition and the drive, and that's something how you can really convince is with the drive, the passion that you have, really speaking up, but also using their language and trying to see, well, if it's a policy brief, you have to write in the language that they understand, that they're working. It's sometimes small words that you might be able to change, or sometimes it's a different perspective you bring in, but that can actually lead to the snowball effect to make a difference. Somewhere in the middle? No, let's go there. Yep.
Okay. Hi, my name is Dan. I'm from the US. To kind of go to addressing Mina's question about why there's kind of like almost a distrust or a lack of belief in youth to kind of get interacted in things like politics and such. A personal example is from where I come from in the US, the state of Massachusetts. It's currently under discussion and potential to come up for a vote of decreasing the voting age to age 16. And my personal views on it aside, I can understand a lot of the discussion against it in some ways, because, for example, I know I personally did not receive a strong education in terms of civics in topics such as that. So I think it's a balance between the quality of education in regards to being a citizen of your country, like the quality of education around how to do that and how to do it properly, and how to, whether it's advocacy or whether it's like grassroots movements from working within your community or whatever it is. I personally, in my experience, I have not seen that being an institutionalized point of education. So I can see that as being like a huge reason why, older generations would not want younger people to be able to vote in like local elections and things like that. But that's just an example that I wanted to share.
But then I can counter-argue, give you a counter-argument. Look at Malala, look at Greta, look at all the climate activists. The voting age also means you can be voted. You can participate in political processes, and that might actually bring young people forward that want to represent their community. So that's the other angle that needs to be taken into account as well. Yeah.
We're sort of facing the same issue in Australia, even though our laws do mean that everyone has to vote, compulsory voting. We find that young people either don't show up, they come up and they just chuck the ballot in the bin, or they just write all over it. It breaks my heart, really, when I hear that. What can we do to engage with our current generation that is able to vote, and also maintain the courage and enthusiasm of our younger generations who can't vote yet, but are like willing to go onto the streets for climate action and things like that? Because right now we're seeing where this generation are sort of lacking behind in wanting to participate in our civic duty to vote for our representatives, whereas our younger ones are raring to go. How can we basically fire our own generation up to start voting for our representatives?
One of the things that I've personally experienced with the voting process and the fact that so many of us are disengaging is the political parties themselves and that lack of education amongst our sort of younger population. You get a lot of misinformation in media, on social media, everything that sort of makes it hard to understand how your vote works in our system. So a lot of people, think we've only got the two parties and like it's choosing the lesser of two evils. But if we were able to educate them more like throughout high school and university and all of that to make them better understand our political processes, I think that we would see more engagement, because We've got one of the better systems in that one, everybody has to vote, but also it's so difficult for your vote not to make a difference. But because of the information that's put out there by our two dominant parties, it makes people think that unless you're voting for these two big guys, you're losing your voice. And I think that if we had some extra measures put in place to counteract that misinformation and increase engagement, we would see a huge turnaround. Thanks.
So it's the quality of education that you mentioned. It's the recognition that young people are actually forming quite a big cohort, quite a big population. So there is actually, should be the interest of the politician to engage with and listen to young people, because they are also decisive about, it's them to decide the outcome. And another thing is, as you said, the misinformation, or the information is so complicated. Whoever listens to political debates on TV, you might get, the 5-minute snapshot of summary of this, but it's also a way how you can manipulate information. And I think using simple language is talking to each other, when did you have the last discussion with your peers about, this policy or this politician and so on and so forth. So also reminding yourselves and your peers around you that you have an obligation to society, but also a very powerful tool, your vote, that can actually shift dimensions if it's channeled to the right ways. So that's a really broad answer to a very complicated issue, but as you can tell, everyone has to play a role in this. And using the channels, using media because you always see negative things on the media, because no one wants to report about the good stories, because they don't attract attention, they are not as liked or whatsoever, but it's also reminding yourself that there are actually good stories out there and pushing them forward.
Thank you. I think an important aspect of promoting peace is becoming an ally. We all have such great ideas. We all have so many passions and things we want to promote for peace within our own communities. But what good is it if we're all divided on all these different issues? For example, I'm not a part of the LGBTQI+ community, right? But if anyone were to ever speak poorly of the LGBT community, I would immediately stop it. And that is being an ally, even though I'm not a part of that community. Or maybe I am, who knows? Or for instance, my friends, when we talk about racial inequalities, no one will speak poorly in front of me about my friend who is of African descent. And in the same way, they won't speak poorly about my friend who is Caucasian in front of me. We have to be an ally, because pacifism, in my eyes, is the root of all evil. I think it's worse than going against the group and speaking poorly, because you're actively engaging in that action against that community. So eliminating pacifism, becoming an ally, and giving space to that marginalized community to speak. I know that a lot of times we don't recognize our privilege. And when I say privilege, it doesn't mean, it's not specific to one group, one race. And in essence, we're all privileged to even be here, right? The costs were really expensive. The flight here was expensive. The Thai massages and all the good food that we've been having, right? We're all privileged to be here and share our ideas. But we have to come together and again, I will reiterate, be an ally. Using your platform, whether that is just coming from a place of privilege or using your social media platform, you have no idea the influence you can have on other people. Maybe it's just 2 or 3 people that you influence, but you don't know what those 2 or 3 people who they're going to influence. And it trickles down. And also holding others accountable for their actions. Just because it doesn't pertain to you or offend you doesn't mean that you can't stand up and say, hey, I think you're wrong. I think you need to be educated on this topic, however you choose to confront it. But we need to start coming together and being allies for these marginalized communities that are, quite frankly, tired of saying the same things over and over and over again. Our friend, I'm sorry, what's your name? Yes.
Tori.
Yeah. Tori?
Yes.
Yes. Our friend Tori, I think on the first or second day, spoke about his experience being a different experience because he's an African American. His experience, I'm sorry. Derek, I'm sorry, Derek. I was like, yeah. I didn't think that was your name, but. So he spoke about this, and it was very brief, and we haven't really touched upon it ever since. But also as a person of color, I feel that my experience has been different as well from other people's experiences. It's time that we start talking about these things. I know that they're uncomfortable, and I know that deep down inside, a lot of people are sick of hearing it. But we're sick of saying it. Thank you.
Very powerful. Thank you very much. And let's go in the back. Yep, you. Yes.
I don't know whose desk this is, but thank you. My name is Mapwana. I'm from Hawaii. We have such a cool culture there because we're so diverse. Like literally, like I think I went to the U.S. mainland one time and I was like, oh, where's all the little Filipino ladies? Or like, you know, like the whole store was a lighter shade than I was, and I wasn't used to it. But I think like when it comes to youth, I think of this experience of, so I was able to teach the youth in our church. And I moved up with them from 10 and 11-year-olds to 11 to 12-year-olds and 13 to 14. I think they just wanted me to follow them. But I remember I was having a really hard time, like emotionally. A lot of things fell out of place in my life. And I remember I was trying to teach the lesson, and I was like, this is not getting anywhere. And so I asked the kids, and I asked them, what do they do to cope with hard things? And it was amazing. These kids like started to, well, I read these books. I was like, you read books? Like, I don't even read books. Like, and they talked about like, well, sometimes when things are hard, you know, I do this. Like, maybe you should bake yourself a cake or something. I was like, what? Like, it was so creative though. And I thought that was the beauty of it was I feel like we're so stuck in like this same mindset of like, let's sit in a conference room and talk about our problems and cry about things that are hard. We all cry the same. The tears are the same color when they come out. The tears are they come out your eyes the same way. Like, we all feel pain, and I think that's important to understand, is that it's not, the issues shouldn't divide us. More so, I feel like our feelings should unite us, of the things that we feel. I don't know what it's like to be in different marginalized communities. I'm in my own whatever little circles I'm in, and which is also marginalized. I don't know, but ultimately it's just like the attitude of gratitude that we need to have, and the other what is that called? The quote that's been coming to mind this whole time was like, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And that's what I was able to figure out with these kids. And that's what I think a lot of us youth, but I feel like us youth have the opportunity to do is to listen more to each other. My dad dropping so many quotes, but this is what runs my life and keeps me alive. But my dad used to tell me, he's like, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, to listen twice and to speak once. And I think that's what we need to do more of, is listen. Like, we talk too much. Stop talking. Like, I mean, it's good, please talk. But I think we need to like not only listen with our ears and listen with our degrees, but listen with our heart. I think that's the biggest thing, because if we are connected there, then it doesn't matter what walk of life we're from, rich, poor, colored, not colored, curly hair, straight hair, whatever. But I think that's something that's really like been pulsing in my heart this whole time, is that we just need to listen with our hearts.
About listening and lifting each other up and not really putting an emphasis on the divide between each other.
Hello everyone, I'm from Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, we are not as lucky as some of you here. We don't have the right to vote. Okay, so what's the problem here? It's I don't know if you guys have heard of Hong Kong protests. It starts June last year, and in November we have an incident happen in Hong Kong Polytechnic University, which is my university, and because the police abusing the power, and it's people got shot or got caught and they disappear, and we don't know where they went after they got caught. And a group of students, around hundreds of students, they are protesting in Hong Kong Polytechnic University. And then when the students are protesting, the police suddenly came and blocked all the exits. It's you have no way to get out of your campus, but the students are just sharing what they believe in. And it's this thing in Hong Kong Polytechnic University lasts around a week. And it's a week, the students got injured, they have no food, they have no water, and it's all blocked by the police. If you got out one step, you either get shot or get caught. And then because some doctors and nurses, they want to go inside the campus and to save the student. And the police they arrest all the nurses and doctors want to come in to save the student. And it's the situation got really bad. And my question is that the youngsters, the young people want to participate. They believe in liberty, they believe in freedom, but it's they do suffer, they do injured. My question is how do you process such trauma and yeah. And if you are interested in what happened in Hong Kong, you can or what I just talked about, you can search about Hong Kong Polytechnic University or Hong Kong Chinese University. There are 2 incidents happened in Hong Kong that are related to students' participation in the protest. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is as well, what makes most young people not involving into violent protests? You know, it's usually those few are put on the spots that really engaging, that are violent and so on and so forth. But the huge bulk of students that actually trying to keep them up straight, that are trying to put, they're really resilient in a situation like this, supporting each other, those are not talked about. The struggle that you had to go through, you know, there is no audience, there's no platform for it. So that's why it's important that you bring your stories out there. Thank you very much for sharing that. It's a safe space, and I hope you can engage in discussions with it, because trauma, psychosocial support, that's important, and those services need to be provided to young people. But often it's the information that's missing. Where can I go? It's the access that's missing. Is that really quality service that you can seek? Is that really what you need? That's difficult to reach, and I think that's something we all need to work on. And the situation in Hong Kong was at the edge of, you know, shifting to very various stages, and I cannot give you an answer to that, but it's really important that you talk about is what you have experienced, that you also watch out to your peers, and if someone is struggling around you, don't feel the responsibility that you can help, but seek the services that are available there. As you said, the nurses and the doctors were trying to come in, but it's also important when you have gone through a situation like this that you seek support afterwards. Yeah.
I think when it comes to religion in Australia, I like came from like a background of like coming like up through Catholic primary school and Catholic high school, and I'm not religious anymore, but I used to be quite religious and part of youth groups and such. And I think something really important to consider, also coming from a rural community, is that we shouldn't see people who are religious, if you're not religious yourself, as like the other. Because these people often have the same core values as us, and they want to treat everyone equally and treat everyone with love and forgiveness, that these are the core values of a lot of religions in the world. So I think it's like what you said, it's actually bringing that into it and saying, hey, I actually believe the same things you do. I believe that we need to look after our neighbour, treat our neighbour as we treat ourselves. So how can we bring your values into our politics and make you kind of see the situation differently? I think it's just like leveling and finding that common ground. And I think a lot of, at least I can't speak for other religions, but in Christianity, I know that a lot of the people where I'm from really, really appreciate that kind of just like respect, because I think that a lot of the time people feel that they're not respected, maybe because they're religious. But yeah.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're running out of time now, and I guess you are very hungry. But I want to encourage you to speak to each other, to listen to each other, to keep this conversation going, because that shouldn't be a one-off presentation here, but it should be a continuous engagement and dialogue. And I thank you very much for sharing your stories. Good ones, difficult ones, but I think we all learn from each other. Thank you.